Hello and welcome to this special Today's Homeowner podcast. You know, one of the things that we get so many questions about painting in and out. It's really the most popular home improvement project that's out there. Some people like it, some people don't. Some people just don't know quite what to do to get the job right. That's why I wanted to sit down with my buddy Nick Slavik, who is a frequent guest on our Today's Homeowner radio show, and talk a little bit about painting, get his opinion on a few things. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Always good to talk to you.
Oh, man, it's always good to talk to you and refreshing that you can, really feel free to share an opinion on certain things because, it's kind of like people will ask me, they'll go, well, what do you think is the best brand out there? Well, if you ask a painter, frequently that opinion is based on whoever they do business with and has their credit and does all of that kind of thing. But I think homeowners want a little more than that. But first of all, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did Nick come from?
Well, so I am from New Prague, Minnesota. My father forced me into servitude for the family painting business when I was 10 years old. So I have been a painter / craftsperson for 27 years now. I own my own painting company. We got a whole pile of people, a very rigorous apprenticeship program, where I train people fresh off the street, fresh to the trades, make them love this job as much as I do, and turn them all into craftspeople.
Oh, man. Right now, all the things we're hearing nationally about the skilled trades and things like that, I mean, boy, we need people like you showing some of the younger folks that you really, if you want to go to college, great, that's fine, but you really don't have to if you really embrace a trade, become skilled at it, and then you can learn how to make some money. There needs to be a lot more folks like you doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And, when you think about, the real American dream, it takes no money to start a painting company, and you basically are only limited by as much effort as you want to put into it. So it's a good thing.
Well, I tell you what, I have had so many different questions, and I know the answers to a lot of these, but I really wanted to just grab a bunch of these out of the stack here and throw at you, especially a lot of them that we've had here recently. And one of probably the most common one is, what do you think about this paint and primer in one? Do I still need to prime? Is this a good product? What's your opinion, Nick?
Two very quick thoughts. Number one, it's usually a very mediocre paint, and it's usually a very mediocre primer, maybe even subpar primer. So when in my business, because I'm a pro, I'm looking for things that are race cars that do one thing very specifically, especially when we're talking about primers. So I separate those very highly and specialize in those. But we get into a gray area where my favorite interior wall paint is actually labeled a paint and primer in one. It's just a phenomenal paint. They wouldn't need to say paint and primer. I don't use it for the primer. It's just a beautiful finish and everything else. So it's sort of like, I don't know. I understand what they're getting with. They're fairly easy for homeowners to work with, but for a pro, specialized products.
Well, I think about, too, we talk about millage. If you, a lot of times people will prime something, they'll put a coat of paint on it, and they'll go, I'm not putting another coat of paint on that. That looks awesome, but it's not going to last. It's not going to have the durability without thickness and millage. That's what I think about maybe when we're talking about the paint and primer in one. If you want to save one coat and put on there, you're still going to hurt yourself without that millage. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And millage is a huge thing, too. And also, when I think about products where, if you're just going to paint some new drywall and you use a paint and primer in one, it's going to be fine. You're not going to mess it up that bad, but the finish won't be even. It won't be that beautiful, lustrous finish. So you can kind of live with that. But where I run into my biggest pushback on stuff like that is when people just get after it with their kitchen cabinets. They don't prep them at all. They don't sand them. They don't wipe them down with alcohol. And they're going with a paint and primer in one right over the top. And in that case, you actually ruin your kitchen cabinet. That peeling, there's nothing you can do to fix that peeling paint besides removing it all. And that's where I always caution people that there's a lot of great uses for paint and primer in one, but be careful how far you push it as a primer.
Right, right. I agree with you on that. Okay, a selfish question here about a project I have going right now. I built a brand new home about 28 years ago, and now I'm building a new one, a little more downsized, but on a beautiful river south of Mobile, Alabama. I'm really, really excited about it. I've installed a National Gypsum Purple XP rock throughout the entire thing. The walls, the ceilings, everything. So I have moisture-resistant rock everywhere, 5/8-inch rock. I just went overboard on all of this.
Wow.
But now, if that were your house, how would you approach that fresh drywall? Of course, you're going to eyeball it. You're going to take your light around, like I'm going to do soon, and make sure things are sanded well and make sure the walls are clean. But should you prime that? Should you use a drywall primer and prime wall, ceilings, and everything?
Yes, and this is one of the biggest difference between my company and almost every other painting company out there, which is I actually follow the instructions that the National Gypsum Council and all the paint manufacturers recommend, which is to clean off the drywall, dust it all off, which almost no other paint company does. Use a specific drywall primer, a polyvinyl acetate, PVA. And the purpose of that PVA, this is a race car again. This is very specialized. It does almost nothing good on this planet except for prime new drywall. And it soaks into the drywall, and it will even out the differences between the paper that's left and the mud joints. And it doesn't cover very well at all. We spray it on. We do not back roll it. It soaks in beautifully. And then what we do is actually sand it all down with a pole sander and then clean up the dust again, and then you paint it like normal.
Oh, man. And this is a latex-based material?
Latex-based, and it's wonderful. And the difference between what people call, that proverbial builder's flat finish, where they spray one or two coats on every new house, and you can't touch it. It comes off on rags. And a beautiful, low luster finish that's good for 20 or 30 years is basically all that priming phase and then choosing a good top coat.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do then. I have of course, an airless sprayer. I've got a good fella that can spray everything, and I want to go in and just put that primer over the whole thing. My drywall finisher did a great job, but you know how it is. Some of the ceilings in this place are 12 foot tall, so you don't you won't know until you get that first coat on there and appropriate lighting. And when we're doing our television show, and we have all of the lights out there. We have all of these intense LED lights shining everywhere.
Yes.
Everybody's got a bad drywall job, I'm telling you.
And that process is exactly it. We take after the priming phase and after we sand it down, we do our light check with LEDs, and we have those 4-foot bar LEDs. I think you can get them for $20 or $30. And boy, all sorts of spooky stuff comes out of that wall when you hold it sideways to it. But very important, because nowadays we got to make up for a lot of general drywall sort of disarray.
Oh, yeah, exactly right. Well, that way I can put the one coat of primer, have the guys come back and do any skimming out or sanding that necessary before we get to finish coats. Okay, moving on here. So we have a lot of people, the average age of homes in the United States right now is 28 years old. So that means, as you know, and as your business is involved in, a lot of people are renovating homes, and renovation, remodeling, those terms can go from anywhere to painting an accent wall to building on a master suite onto the side. But so many people get to that point where they want to put a coat of paint on. Someone has cautioned them that might be oil-based paint. And so that the simplest way of going about that to determine if it's oil or if it's latex. What do you suggest on that?
So the easiest way to do that with sort of stuff you probably have at home is take some alcohol, rubbing alcohol, denatured alcohol. And if you rub the denatured alcohol on paint and all it does is clean it up and shine it up, it's probably oil. It could also be lacquer, but most likely oil. If you take that same alcohol and wipe it on a water-based paint, it'll actually reactivate the paint, make it gummy, and take some of it off.
I got you. Okay, there's a good straight tip. So try whatever you're painting, try a little bit of alcohol on it and see how it reacts. If it cleans it up, as Nick said, it's oil. If not and gums it up, it's latex. Okay, If it's oil, now what do? You, of course, can go back with an oil-based paint. But if you wanted to use latex, what's that important step between doing that and using latex?
So we go through a process in my company called SVT, which is sand, vac, and tack. So if, and I was going to mention too, a little more involved way, if you're not going to use alcohol or don't have any, I always just do the scratch test in my company too, where we take either a top coat or a primer and we brush a little section on, leave it overnight. And if you can scratch it off, you didn't get a good bond. So basically what we're trying to do then, if we have some oil and we want to go to a latex top coat, we'll go through the SVT. We'll sand it all down. Not heavy. You're basically just scuffing the surface to give it some tooth. We will vacuum it off, and then we will tack rag. And we use microfiber towels, soak them in water, wring all the water out, and then just wipe the trim down. Well, that'll get rid of any of that micro dust that the vacuum doesn't do. And then you're ready for a primer. Now, in Minnesota, we can still get oil primer readily, and we will use that until they take it away from us. But if you're on the East and West Coast, there's all sorts of restrictions with that, and I would go to a water-based bonding primer. Again, like a race car specific thing. It only is made for bonding, not for covering, not for stain killing and other stuff, just sticks.
That's something, bonding primer is something a lot of homeowners are not aware of, but boy, is that a valuable thing to have on your shed shelf there, because there's so many things that if you start the project after you sand, clean, get everything right, that bonding primer can make something last a long time. You mentioned cabinets earlier. Works pretty well for those cabinets, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely, yep. And now again, if you can't use a pure oil primer, go for the bonding primer. But at that point, anytime you put it over a bare wood, you always want to make sure that it's going to block the stain. And even on oak cabinets that are 20 to 50 years old, there still can be some tannin left in them. So again, go to the backside of a door, brush on some of your bonding primer, and if you get those tobacco-colored orange stains coming through, you're probably going to have to use then either a specific stain killing or a stain blocking and bonding primer.
All right, perfect. Something that's intriguing to a lot of homeowners is when you talk about paint additives. And one, with me living in the Southeast, certainly, well, of course, everybody's battling mold and mildew these days. But I'll tell you what, with the current house I'm in, when I painted it for the first time or had it painted, that paint job lasted me. Now, it was a brick house, and so I'm painting just the freeze board, brick mold around windows and doors, and a large overhang and fascia. My paint job lasted 24 years. Now that
as a painter, I hate to hear that.
I know. Of course, that's not normal, especially in this kind of environment here. But I have to. Well, first of all, I bought top of the line paint. I won't mention the brand name just because, but top of the line, nationally known brand paint. So not the entry level, top of the line. And every single ounce of primer and paint that I used, I dropped some mildewcide in there and had to mix it in, the M1 additive and all. Just wondering what your thoughts were on that, because, I just can't think that just the quality paint kept the mold and mildew away. I primed it with oil.
Yep.
As soon as they finished, I let them spray it and back roll it. Told them to go home. Next day, nothing but caulking. Caulked everything with a high-quality acrylic latex caulk. Go home, let it dry, come back, and then spray and back roll 2 coats of acrylic latex. And, I had the millage, I had the additive. But what do you think about mildewcide additives? Does it really work?
Up in Minnesota, we have a not pure experiment. Down south, you guys are going to deal way more with that stuff. And the contractors that I correspond with over social media, it's a big issue the farther south you go because of the humidity, and especially when you get to coastal stuff. We really don't get a lot of that here. I probably once or twice a year, I use one of those additives, and I have no data to suggest that it is useful. I mean, on the projects I've done, we have not had a problem with mold or mildew, but it's a small data set and it's not a problem we deal with. It's more of, the homeowner, kind of like that. I've had good experience with this. Will you use it again? And absolutely, I'm fine with it.
Okay, another one is when you're painting with latex paint, different qualities of paint have different drag and so forth, and, usability and flow and so forth. And one of the additives we use is a latex paint additive, and I think it's called Trawl.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that? And would that help a homeowner out with some of their projects?
Yes, and actually, this is a little sneaky tip for homeowners that the last time we talked about keeping a wet edge, and wet edge is very important in painting, not only for aesthetics but for the uniformity of shell. And adding things like Trawl to your paint makes it wetter for longer. It gives you more open time, and that allows homeowners, DIYers, and even pros like myself to be able to get that even wet edge coverage. The most useful spot for that is we have every one of my crews carries around at least 2 gallons of it. We add it to our exterior paints because we're sort of known as a hand finishing company. We still brush a lot of our houses up here, and we use a lot of that because that'll give us that open time when we're on a 30-foot wide wall to actually keep that wet edge with multiple people working on it. Very useful.
Oh, I never even thought about that aspect of it. That makes a lot of sense. Now, here's an additive, and I don't even know what it does. And what an odd name, Japan Dry. Is that what it is?
Yes. So not only Trawl. Trawl is an extender, we call it, for water-based paint. Its older grandpa is actually Penetrol, which is used for oil-based paints, and Japan Dryer used to go along with that. So, like I said, I've been messing around with this craft for 27 years now. So I still remember the days where you could just go buy oil wall paint for your house, and you had a choice between water-based or oil wall paint. And at that point, either Penetrol or Japan Dryer, you could manipulate the drying times because, as you know, oil takes forever to dry. Right. And if you have some trim or a cabinet that you want to speed it up, you can add a little bit of that Japan Dryer. I still have some in my shop. The only downside is if you're using like a white enamel, it'll discolor it. You're playing with a lot of chemistry, and most people don't understand it. But you can, if you step on these paints too much, with either Penetrol to make it open longer or Japan Dryer to make it dry quicker, there are some unintended consequences when using it.
Yeah. I always wondered about that. I've never really researched it. I saw it one time, and I know I think the particular case it was kitchen cabinets that we used oil on, and I think the painter was trying to move things along a little bit so that he could get that check, So
and I will tell you this, in Danny, in all my experiments with this stuff, and I'm known for taking a dozen mason jars and working on things in different proportions and charting the results. And honestly, with all the Japan Dryer I've used, it really hasn't made that much of a difference. I mean, natural atmosphere and weather does really make a difference.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I could keep peppering you with questions over and over and over. I certainly hope you'll get back together with me again soon, and let's talk some more because, again, it's so refreshing when you can really get a straightforward opinion. That's what we like to do here at Today's Homeowner. And, Nick, all the times that I've known you, same way, it's we don't have any secrets. We want to be able to help homeowners and certainly educate your customers on exactly the right way to do it. And I would encourage anybody listening to our podcast, if you have any questions for Nick about painting, go ahead and send them todayshomeowner.com/podcast. And we'll get together again soon and see if we can't help you out with some of the other questions that you have. And also, you feel free to send us any of your questions, todayshomeowner.com/podcast. And also, you can also give us a ring anytime at 1-800-946-4420. Well, Nick, you better grab your paintbrush and get back out there because deadlines are looming on you. But thanks so much for being with us, Nick. And give us your website.
www.nickslavik.com.
All right, Nick. You take care. And again, thanks so much for being with us a little while.
Thanks, guys.
It's time to dust off those drop cloths and rollers because it's paint week here at Today's Homeowner.
And Labor Day is the perfect time to tackle paint projects around your home. And we've got the expertise and advice you need.
We'll be sharing all of the best painting hacks, tips, and inspiration.
Plus, we're giving away a $100 Home Depot gift card to get the supplies you need for the perfect paint job.
So visit todayshomeowner.com/paintweek today to learn more and enter.